Hello, once again, everybody, to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, the Fon Pod, the Foncast, all of the things. This is Cody, back again with another of my James Bond series watch along, 60th anniversary style. Today we are checking out a movie starring Roger Moore and some other people with a song that's okay and some other elements that are, well, yes. The next movie in our lineup here is For Your Eyes Only. And this is one, two, three, four, five. It's the fifth Roger Moore movie. We have one more to go. It's Octopussy after this. We're in, I believe, 1981 for this one. And I have to say, this one definitely, well, let's get into the categories and find out if this is classic or crap. We're going to start off this one with our title and theme, as we have done in the past. Title of this one, For Your Eyes Only, which I gather is from a Ian Fleming short story, or it was a book that was made up of short stories. I forget exactly which, but this is not a full novel, I don't believe, that's being presented here as the movie. And as a matter of fact, I believe they changed basically everything from the book to the movie on this one anyway, unless I'm getting these mixed up, which is possible as I'm about 13, 14 in at this point. But I thought I read that about this one. For Your Eyes Only refers to the mission briefing that Bond gets near the beginning of this movie, and then also comes on as a double entendre here towards the end, as the lady is about to show Bond, as they get ready to have sex, her body, but it's for his eyes only, essentially. It was okay. Give the title 3 on this. Not spectacular. The music in this one, Sheena Easton is tasked with singing the theme For Your Eyes Only. It's a softer song again here. We've had a few of these soft ones during the Roger Moore run. Unfortunately, again, this does not feel like a Bond theme, and I'm probably a bit biased at this point in my rating, I will admit, because we've had such good Bond themes early in this that compared to those, this seems even worse. And that's no offense to Sheena Easton, who was a great singer in the 80s, but the song doesn't do a lot. It's very casual. It's very slow, moody, almost romance-like, and there is some of that in this film, but really not much. So it almost doesn't fit. Like, this one almost would have went better with The Spy Who Loved Me, like theme-wise, because there's not really a romance in this one. It's kind of weird. So for this to be like the payoff punchline and also the way the song is sung, kind of unusual. So for that reason, I have to give this a 6 out of 10. And unfortunately, that ties our lowest score we have had for a song along with Thunderball. Keep that phrase in mind because it may come back again here today. All right, talking about our acting in this one, we have 15 points for Bond, 15 points for the women in the movie, and 10 points for the villain. Roger Moore started strong in his series, kind of faded away with The Spy Who Loves Me, came back a bit with Moonraker, and then for this one, I don't know. He didn't seem to be into this one again. Based on the plot of this one, I can't say I fully blame him. I think actors know, especially more today, but even back then in the 70s, 80s, I think actors know when they have a good script, good material that they're working with, or if they're merely just signed on for the paycheck or the notoriety or whatnot. You know, a lot of our actors and actresses today are very choosy with the topics that they pick. They won't come out for a film that they don't think is going to help their career or isn't Oscar worthy or et cetera, et cetera. And here it just seems like, I don't know, Roger Moore was there. He did do all the perfunctory duties as Bond, but overall, probably one of his weakest efforts so far. So I'm going to give this an 11 out of 15 for Roger Moore. Women of this movie, This is an odd one. We have a young skating protege who is madly in love with James Bond, amongst other people, but particularly him. We have Melina Havelock, which is the, I guess, main Bond lady in this film, whose parents die, and then she pops up a couple times and helps Bond with a few missions here or there by necessity for the plot. But there's not really a romantic angle until the very end of the movie. Melina is somebody who, despite being the expert in underwater diving, many times has to be saved by James Bond while she's down there. She is somebody who is very striking. She's very beautiful, but does not, again, have a wide emotional range for her character. It's like her parents were killed basically in front of her. And that doesn't really show with her emotions the rest of the movie. It's like these dangerous situations happen to her. And again, we get like this wooden performance out of her. So I hate to do this, but I have to award Melina Havelock 8 out of 15, which ties our lowest score for any of the women. This is Carol Bouquet, I'm going to guess, spelled like a bouquet of flowers. But I have to give her an 8 out of 15 for our score on the women on this one. So really not good. All right, next up, the villains. Terrible. Terrible, 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 terrible. We get a minor villain who's killed early. We find out later that the person, this is getting into plot slightly here, but the only good thing about the villain in this one is the villain turned out to be the first person that Bond thought was on his side, that he's getting information from. And the person who was purportedly the villain turned out to be, yes, a smuggler, but actually a smuggler with a heart of gold. And turned out to be Bond's ally as this one continued on. So in terms of there being villains in this, we have like a Russian biathlete who shoots and skis with no personality whatsoever. We have a final villain, if you will, who has no personality whatsoever, barely given any screen time on his own. 4 out of 10. I'm going harsh on this. This is the worst villain in any movie I have seen so far in this entire run of the Bond films. 4 out of 10. Nothing. There's nothing here. On to the plot and the action. And I'm going to do these pretty quick, ladies and gents. Pretty quick indeed. Let's see here. We have a vessel that goes missing. Yes, I know. Surprising. This is a new concept. And it has the Automatic Targeting Attack Communicator, or the ATAC, which the Ministry of Defense uses to coordinate the Royal Navy's fleet of Polaris submarines. All right, so we have, actually it is sunk, I guess, at the beginning of this movie. And then we have a race to go find where it's at. All right. An archaeologist, Timothy Havelock, goes to find it. And then when he basically does, he and his wife are killed by a Cuban hitman, and their daughter survives. That's Melina, as mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, we have the KGB also learning about the St. George that has been sunk and sending his agent there. Bond is sent by his agency there. It's a race to see who can get the ATAC so they can control all of the ballistic missiles from the Polaris. Bond goes to Spain. He's spying on the bad guy who killed the parents. He's captured, but he escapes as he finds out that this guy was killed by somebody. Surprise! It was the daughter. The two escape. We have some technology here, some facial recognition technology. That scene was kind of interesting in an 80s kind of way. And they identify the man as Emil Leopold Locke. This is who the guy who was killed was paying. They go to his base in Italy. This is where we find a couple other characters here, which again, I was saying Bond thinks they're on his side, but of course they're really not. We have a figure skating side plot here with Bibi Doll, who is preparing for the Olympics. We have East German biathlete Eric Krieger, who is chasing Bond. This is the big blonde guy who has the gun and everything else. We have some people being killed. We have a casino scene. We have, man, I don't even know. We could get into all sorts of stuff with this one. Bases are destroyed. Eventually, there's a lot of diving and swimming in this scene. In the movie, I should say, with Melina and Bond, they go down a couple times. There's an underwater fight. We get more skiing scenes. Roger Moore must have loved his skiing scenes or something. Or maybe he could actually ski, and that's why they kept putting him in all these movies with skiing scenes. It was kind of weird. Underwater combat, just for the record, for any future movie producers who may be listening to this, underwater combat is not generally that exciting. It's in slow motion. It's awkward. Some of the effects don't really make sense when you consider how physics work underwater. This idea that, you can get a hole in your suit and then still, as it's filling up, survive. This idea that your breathing tank might rupture or have a hose that pops out of it and you can still survive for a long time. I'm not sure how that works. One thing I admit I don't remember. I was trained to scuba dive once upon a time back in like 2009 or so, 2008, 2007, somewhere in there. I did a day of scuba dive training in a deep tank. And one thing I can't remember is if you were to have a mouthful of water, as I believe she did at one point in this movie, and somebody handed you the oxygen mask for you to breathe, I don't know how that works if you have a mouthful of water, because I don't think you can just spit it into the tank. So I'm not sure how that part works, because that did also happen in this once. But there were just so many scenes in this that made no flipping sense. I don't know. It felt like there was no emotional stakes to what's happening in here. We get, at the end here, a pretty cool little scene with a parrot who had overheard the bad guys talking and, of course, repeats the phrase for Bond, and they figure out where it's at. And it's a mountaintop monastery. It was really cool. There is the most ridiculous scene. I got to talk about this stupid scene for a second. James Bond spends the time to literally mountaineer up to the top. He is pounding in stakes into the cliff as he's going. He's putting his rope through the what do you call it? The lanyards, not the lanyards, the clips. Can't think of the name at the moment. Carabinas. And he is making this trail up the mountain so that he can sneak into this mountaintop base so that he can drop a basket down, I guess Rapunzel style, to help the other people who are coming on this mission at the end come up. As he's going up, we have one solitary henchman who notices him and begins to start taking the pins out of the wall. But this henchman doesn't go alert anybody else at this base. He just continues to rappel himself down the cliff using only a piece of rope and then knock out these things that Bond is putting into the wall. So Bond falls and then swings, and one of the stakes comes out, and then he swings again, and it's this big dramatic scene. And the entire time, this guy is going down untied to anything and not telling anybody at the base that Bond is there. It made no sense at all. The whole scene pissed me off because it was about 10 minutes long. And eventually, of course, Bond kills the guy, throws him off the cliff, and then he gets to the top and lowers the basket. But it's like a 10-minute scene, which I think is supposed to be tense because of the mountaining aspect of it, the climbing aspect of it, and it just made no sense. Well, he just happened to randomly find the one egotistical guard who was like, I can take out James Bond 007 all by myself and not have to tell anyone. And to top it off, I'm so confident I'll go down without even tying myself to anything. Okay, that scene pissed me off. Then we get a fight at the end here where essentially Bond kills bad guy. We get Bond almost being killed by another bad guy here, but being saved by the ally that he had gained by this point, Columbo. I didn't even say his name at this point. And then we find out that the Soviets arrive in helicopter. I actually did like this part, and they were there to pick up the ATAC, but Bond throws this machine off a cliff, and the guy from Russia leaves actually kind of laughing because Bond said détente, which means, I just saved the world from additional explosive problems because now neither one of us can have this machine which would launch the missiles off the submarines. So the KGB, let's think about this, literally came to the top of this mountain base. They've dealt with Bond in how many movies here now? And instead of fighting him, laughs and just leaves, which I kind of liked the humor there, but didn't really make sense. Again, I didn't think. This whole side plot with the skater, the young girl, BB, that kind of, I don't know, felt a little cringy due to ages here. That's just dropped real quick at the end. It's resolved and that's done and over with. And we get at the end here Bond and Melina in her father's yacht, and actually kind of an interesting little scene at the end where British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher calls them to congratulate Bond herself on this one because such a good job in saving the world and everything. And we get the parrot answering the phone and talking to Margaret Thatcher in a comical little scene here at the end. And I forget what he keeps saying, kissy kissy or something like that to Margaret Thatcher. And she's all like, oh, Bond, oh, James, type thing. And then it kind of gets worse from there. And the MI6 people cut off the phone call because they didn't want her to hear anymore. So let's do scores on this quick. Action, there is some. It's not as good as the other ones. I feel like I'm over skiing movies for a while. I'm probably also over movies that are underwater for a while. I feel like they need to come up with some new action type scenes in these movies. So I'm going to give the action a 10 out of 15. And then for the plot in this one, 14 out of 30. It's kind of a wonky plot. There's side plots that are not necessary for anything. They don't need to be there. The characters that are involved in the plot don't always make sense. I don't know. I just felt tired again. It's like, here's another movie about missiles, Cold War, yada, yada. And we're in the early 80s at this point, remember here. So we're, headed to the last decade of the Cold War, but I'd give you a favorite line from this movie to try to cheer me up a little bit. But for favorite line in this movie, I actually wrote none. It's the first movie I didn't even come up with a favorite line for because this movie is so bad. It's so, so bad. Score tonight, we have 10, 14, 4, 8, 11, 6, and 3. If you add all that up, you get a big steaming dumpster fire score of 56, which does actually tie Thunderball as the worst movie of all so far. Dear God, this was so bad. Like, it couldn't hold my interest. The scenes were so long. Like, I don't know. The climbing scene, terrible. James Bond on his skis. There were a couple fun moments in that, but like, he goes down a ski jump. He goes down side of a mountain. He gets stuck on a luge track or toboggan track or whatever the hell you call that thing, the bobsled. I don't know. I can never tell them apart if they use the same track or not. I don't really know. If you're an Olympic expert, let me know if they use the same track or not. But he goes through all these locales, and it's like, what? I don't know that we need all that. It's like this movie in particular, with the underwater fighting and the little submachine and the suit that somebody was wearing underwater to fight them and everything, it just felt like they maybe were a little too concerned with shoving in things that they thought would be cool or pop the audience, as we would say as wrestling fans, to get them like, woo. And maybe at the end of it all, when they put the movie together, they were like, oh, what we should have did? Had a good plot. Actually made things interesting. Gave our actors anything to work with in this movie, because that would have been better than what they came up with. 56 out of 100. That's a pure crap tonight, ladies and gentlemen, for your eyes only. Crap, 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 crap. One Roger Moore movie left. It's Octopussy from 1983. That's up next. Then I have to track down a copy of Sean Connery returning in our other non-Eon licensed production, Never Say Never Again. So, and then the next movie is the first appearance of Timothy Dalton. So we really have three interesting movies coming up. I'm excited for that. The last Roger Moore movie, the return of Sean Connery, and then the first Timothy Dalton movie. Before we get into the rest of Timothy Dalton and then Pierce Brosnan and then Daniel Craig. So good things to look forward to on the horizon. Now, as I mentioned here, this is going to drop on the first day of school. I'm recording this the night before the first day of school, actually. On Tuesday, this will drop on Wednesday, I believe. And yeah, it's going to be hard to fit these in once we get rolling here with all the stuff I have to do for that. But we'll keep trying to get through all these, and we'll go from there. So hope you all have a good week out there, whatever's left of it for you, whenever you happen to hear this episode. As always, want to thank everybody involved behind the scenes and on the microphones here for us at Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This has been Cody, and this tonight has been For Your Eyes Only, but it could be called For My Eyes Only, because there's no way in hell I would recommend you watch this film. Tonight's episode, rating crap. We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.